Welcome to The Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I'm humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Paul Deloughery. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're very correct.
Okay. An author, attorney, and thought leader whose personal journey with loss and inheritance shaped his career in estate planning and probate litigation. Paul's story is one of family secrets, unexpected wealth, and the profound ways grief intersects with money. He grew up believing his stepfather was his biological father, only to discover the truth decades later. That revelation led to a massive inheritance, sudden wealth that came without emotional connection or guidance. Risky investments followed, but so did his callings to help families navigate the complex emotional and legal terrain of inheritance. In our conversation, Paul and I will explore how family and childhood trauma, family dynamics, and silence around money can shape the way people experience grief and inheritance. He reminds us that estate planning isn't just about the documents, it's about shared values, communication, and preparing loved ones for the emotional weight of money. Paul, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Justin. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I appreciate you being here. Paul, so you reached out to me over email a couple months ago and we chatted and I got to hear your story. And obviously I was like, you have to be on the podcast, but you were super interested in what I'm doing here at the Currency of Grief. So can you please share with me what made you want to come on the podcast and reach out?
Well, I think what you're doing is very important, and I want to support you. And specifically, what I see, let me just do a kind of a quick introduction of what I do. So I primarily do probate litigation. So families fighting over the things that are left over when a loved one dies. Primarily, sometimes it has to do with when the loved one is incapacitated, or maybe marries a young caregiver when the older parent has dementia. So, like there's different other things also. It's not necessarily always about death, but what I have noticed is there's I think a misunderstanding or a myth that if you have an estate plan, it's like you're inoculated from any problems in the future. And that's not really true. Like I might be overstating my case here a little bit, but I want to say that there's almost no correlation between whether you put an estate plan in place, whether you have a will or a trust, for example, and if your family is going to fight when you pass away. There's almost no relationship. Now, there you might be able to avoid the probate court, for example, but if they're going to fight, they're going to fight, and that might just end up also in probate court, but in a different type of a framework. Um, so, so anyway, yeah, just what's mostly needed is, like you said, is having shared values and good communication and whatnot. That's I think that's the foundation, and then you can have an estate plan on top of that.
That makes total sense. And that's what we'll dive into today is how to communicate those shared values, what your experience was with either the communication or the lack thereof, and what happens next. And so, Paul, here on the currency of grief, we don't hold back. We dive in pretty quickly to the deep stuff.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about your grief story.
Okay. So it was a fall day in Vancouver, Washington, and I was sitting beside my father, who I'd only met 6 weeks earlier. We were in the hospice. He was in hospice. Uh, he couldn't communicate anymore. And at that point, I knew that he had a house, but I'd never been there. And so I thought, well, maybe I should check on the house. I walked into the house and found a desk with a desktop computer and a printer. And on top of the printer was the previous year's, the 2018 federal tax return. And on the bottom of the tax return, it showed a $1.5 million passive income. And so he obviously had some money. I didn't know the specifics at that point. Um, I, I that, my mindset at the time, my frame of mind was not like, "Yay, I'm super rich," but I had a father who was like who I had only just met, my real biological father, um, and I couldn't ask him any questions about it anymore because he was beyond where he could communicate. So I primarily focused on being with him. Um, he passed away a couple days later, and then I discovered soon after that he had over a $28 million estate, and he had accumulated it by investing his military retirement in penny stocks. And like he was obsessed about it. He was like he really uh, that's what he did. He spent decades, and he was a Vietnam veteran, so I would say a little bit antisocial, or a little like he preferred to just be by himself. And what he did was he watched investment shows and studied it and all of that. And as years grew by, he had uh, mostly bad investments, but some home runs, and the home runs were enough to set him up pretty well. And then what I realized later is that uh, I had to pay over half of that in estate taxes, uh, and so I was at emotional extremes. My mother is the one who kept him a secret from me. That's why I didn't even meet him until like he was on his deathbed.
Yeah,
Uh,
let me ask about that,
sure,
because let's take a step back to
sure.
childhood, like when you were born. Um, so obviously you never met your dad, your biological father. So talk to us about your mom. I think you had a stepdad, if that's correct. So who
Hmm.
raised you? And then did you find out why did your mom keep your dad a secret?
Yeah. Well, so again, I never met my biological father. She talked to him uh, when she was pregnant before I was born, and said, surprise, you're going to have a baby. He didn't believe that it was his. And so they had a big argument. They couldn't overcome it. And so they got a divorce before I was even born. So then I was raised by my stepfather, um, but it in a way, like there's all kinds of different versions of parenting and attachment styles and everything. Um, my stepfather, he I have to say he was a good father, um, in so many ways, but the one thing that seemed missing was uh, and I don't want to sound like a whiner because I'm grateful for what he did give me, but the one thing that was missing was just kind of um, I don't know. There was something about um, boy. There was just something odd that I could feel as a child, like just um, I think I was aware of other relatives maybe talking behind my back or something like that. Something about how I wasn't a real Deloughery. I wasn't really his, or didn't really belong in the family or something. Or I got that sense from some of the other relatives. Now I mean, he called me son. We did a lot of things, all of that. But there was a um, kind of a crack in the foundation of my of like this reality that I knew as a child, and I guess that caused me to well, it caused me to not really trust myself, because everyone around uh, was was play acting essentially that yeah, he's your father and all this kind of stuff. And so I just learned early on not to trust myself and to trust other people, because that was apparently like more reliable.
How long was just your stepdad part of your life?
Yep. uh so he died uh shortly after my 16th birthday.
Okay.
um
And your mom, so your stepdad, his name was on your birth certificate. You were Delowery from
Correct.
birth.
Correct.
And
He never adopted me, but he put his name. He had his name added to my birth certificate. Yeah.
wow. And your mom and your stepdad raised you, and your mom was part of your life for how long?
Um, yeah. So she died. See if would have been for. I want to say when I was around 40. I'll have to do the math here, but
Mhm.
uh, so it would have been 2017.
And
She
so,
died.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
what was your family like growing up? It was, you couldn't, you were struggling to trust other people, struggling to trust yourself. Um,
Well, it was funny because my so I grew up for many years with my stepsister. I just knew her as my sister, Kathy. Um, wonderful girl, wonderful lady now. Um, and she knew this secret. So, and I could tell. I mean, she's a good person. I could tell that she wanted to tell me, but she couldn't. And like that just creates an awkwardness in relationships. If like there's a real key fact that you're pledged, to your she was pledged to her own parents, her
mhm,
own father, to not tell me. And then my mom was I mean, she was I don't know how to say it. You could say it different ways. I'll say like a warrior queen, um, like very domineering, and like you did not want to cross her. So like
mhm,
my sister knew, you know, if my mom said don't tell Paul this, she wasn't going to do it. So
got it. And and then when did it when did you find out that, like, when did your mom tell you?
well, she didn't really tell me. What happened was my wife and I moved to Arizona, and uh, I think the fact that we separate, or that I physically separated from my mom, like gave some of the other relatives a reason to think, okay, now maybe it's safe to kind of talk to Paul about this. Um, so my sister Kathy came out, and oh, what was it? She just at one point um just kind of blurted out, "Oh, you don't know about your real father yet." And like, what? I mean, that's a strange thing to just blurt out. But she wouldn't tell anymore. And then we talked to oh, and then um I had a aunt that came out and stayed with us. And like, well, we weren't really close to the aunt, but I mean, maybe she wanted to see Arizona. I don't know, but I think maybe she wanted to say it, but like the time to talk didn't naturally come up. Another one of my mom's sisters, and she said, "Okay, well, um, I'll tell you, but first of all, you have to at least give your mom the opportunity to come to say it herself." And so I asked my mom, listen, I'm getting something like, I'm getting information about having a different father. Do you know anything about that? And she said, oh, the relatives are just lying. They're saying things to hurt me or something like that. And so, okay, then I went back and talked to her sister, and she said, okay, yeah. And so she said, yeah, so Paul something. I think he lives in Vancouver, Washington. I'm not really sure. And anyway, I tracked him down on the internet and sent a letter because I didn't have his email, and then he sent a letter back, and then we started emailing back and forth. But it was a little bit awkward, again, because we did we had whole different um
Live.
life perspectives. Like, he's a Vietnam vet, and he had been uh I think partly out of respect, probably more out of fear of my mom. He just didn't want to get involved at all. And and then I mean, I was aching to have a relationship with a father, and those two things, we couldn't connect somehow. And towards the very, very end, I did talk to him 6 weeks before he died. Talked to my biological father
Hmm.
in the nursing home. And yeah, it was like looking at an older version of myself, and he said that. But uh, yeah, things just happened way too fast. I think he assumed that he was going to get better, but he actually had some pretty aggressive cancer, and so it just went downhill.
Okay, so you were emailing and sending letters to him while he was in the nursing home, and he had already.
Well, no, he wasn't in the nursing home. This is like 10 years earlier. He
Okay.
and I were communicating, and then we kind of cut off communication just because he kept wanting to oh send political jokes and talk about investing, and I wanted to have a relationship with the father. And I mean, now I think I would have better perspective, or better, be open-minded enough to think, okay, he wants to communicate through political jokes and talking about investing. Fine, we can do that. I'll enter your world, and
Mhm.
I'll learn. And it would have been great. I wish I would have learned more about investing from him, but
Mhm. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So,
yeah.
so wild. So your stepfather passed away when you were 16, and you always sensed something that wasn't there, but then, um, you know, he did care for you, and you did have an amazing experience with him. And then, a number of years later, your family told you about, like, hinted at and told you about your biological dad. You were able to track him down and reach out to him in Washington,
Mm.
um and then your mom passed away. And what, like, how did she pass?
So what happened is she came down in January of 2017 uh, to visit us in Arizona, and then one morning, I think it was the morning before she was supposed to leave and go back to Minnesota. Um, she finally said, um, "Do you have any information about your father?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I have a folder with some emails that we've gone back and forth about, and I pulled it out and um, laid it on the counter, and then went off to work. And I guess she read through that, and I don't know, somehow maybe it was emotional or something. Um, she she took some pain pills, I guess, to kind of um I mean, none of this sounds appropriate or healthy, but I think she took some pain pills to kind of uh what well, whatever, self-medicate. um and she overdid it. And so later that day, uh my wife was the first to come home, and my mom was laying on the ground, and I uh, helped her into bed, and she kind of collapsed in the bed with a guttural sound, and I think that was the last sound. It was probably the last breath she ever gave.
Well,
And then in the morning she was cold. So the
it,
joke the joke is that the last thing my mom ever told me is, Paul, there's something important I need to tell you.
Wow. Do you think it was about your biological dad?
We can speculate about all
Of
kinds of
course.
things. Yeah.
Well, how did and then how long after that did your biological father pass away?
Uh,
Or did you meet him
about
in person and
yeah, it's like 2.5 years after that.
okay. And so yeah, what was the relationship like in those 6 weeks leading up to what was well,
Yeah.
yeah, the 6 weeks leading up to your dad's passing, and like, did you have any conversations with your mom or your dad about, um, you know, well, first off, how did you cope emotionally, and then, yeah, we'll talk about what the next steps were financially.
Well, I mean, you have to understand, I had a very codependent relationship with my mom, which means that I relied on her. I mean, I had a unhealthily close relationship with her. So when she died, it was very painful. Um, and yeah, and I mean, it took me a long, long, long time, and it's taken me years to kind of go the full circle of hating her for what she did, of keeping secrets from me, and how she raised me, to finally to also understanding that did the best she personally could, because she also grew up in a very chaotic environment. I mean, her father was physically abusive, um, and there in my mom's house of origin, um, there was physical abuse, psychological abuse towards their mom. Um, I think some incest. I'm not sure on the. I'm not sure if the incest was from my grandparents, but there was some other not good stuff going on that has uh, carried forth, not necessarily for me, but for other people in my extended family, going on for generations. There's a lot of stuff going on there,
Mm.
but
Where were you born?
uh, Grand Forks, North Dakota, on the
Okay.
Air Force Base.
Oh wow. Okay. And then you live in Arizona now.
I do, yeah.
Okay. Um, and who gave you support after your mom passed away?
I mean, that's a great question. Um, that was kind of missing for me. Um, I think my wife tried to, but in the course of, I think from the whole experience, I started uh, growing, like from a personal development standpoint, and becoming more self-aware, and um, somehow um, we grew apart, or I feel maybe I grew apart from her. I think anyway, we grew apart. I ended up, um, within a couple years after that, after my mom's death, filing for divorce. Um, but yeah, you ask in terms of support network. That was hard. Like around that same time, um, I ki- I it's kind of funny. Like I mean, here in Arizona, I didn't really have like close friends yet. I mean, because I just worked really hard as a lawyer, and so I was um I didn't have that. I mean, I ended up at one point getting a girlfriend, and I don't know, I belonged to a church at the time, but I wasn't feeling like, I didn't feel connected to them, partly because it was the same church that my soon to be ex-wife belonged to.
Hmm.
And so anyway, so then I kind of left that, and I never gotten, so yeah, that part of it was hard. That part of it was hard.
Sorry to hear that. Um, and then 2.5 years after your mom passed away, reconnected with your biological father. and 6 weeks before his passing, correct?
Right.
And he passed away. You went into his house
Well,
um, and found the tax return, knew that he had some
yeah.
money. So what happened
So,
next after he passed away?
well, let me back up a little bit then. So I met him 6 weeks before he died at the nursing home. Then I went up again like 2 weeks after that, and or maybe 3 weeks, something like that. I didn't know how fast his decline would be, and so I thought that we had time. I was expecting just to kind of have him recover, and then he would start to make trips down to see us and that kind of thing. But on the second trip, I could actually no longer talk to him. Like he declined that bad, and he tried to whisper to me, but I literally have no idea what he was whispering. I mean, so there was there was maybe a couple of weeks where I was able to call him on the phone, and he kind of I I think he was trying to figure out if he could trust me, and so he said, um, like just hypothetically, if I had $1 million and I wanted to get on Medicaid, what would I do? And I gave a very lawyerly answer and walked him through it and what his options were and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that he worded it that way, I think he was just seeing if he could trust me, or was I a gold digger or just out to out for his money or something. And I mean, people who have money, that is a real thing where you have to
Mhm.
always ask if the person actually wants to talk to you because of who you are, or is it just because of you know a paycheck they're expecting.
Yeah, that must have been super challenging having just met your
Yeah,
biological father,
yeah,
for him to be testing you.
yeah.
It sounds like all you wanted was that fatherly figure as part of your life.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what happened next? What happened after um, your biological father passed away?
Well, I started li- I contacted a financial advisor who said, "Oh yeah, you should just liquidate all those assets."
Mm.
And like, oh yay, okay, I'll do it anyway. So I did it.
Well, let me call a timeout here. So, like,
Sure.
like biological father passed away. Um, how did you like? Did he have any other family members? What was like?
Oh
Did he have
yeah,
a
I
funeral with a ton of other people? Were you the only one?
um, I'm his only son. We had no funeral. I didn't know who to invite. Um, he has a or he had a brother, and there's some cousins on that side. Um, but I don't think they were super close, and they didn't end up being super close to me. So yeah, we just it ended up being a very um what kind of anticlimactic thing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just very very private. So
Mm.
so
And
I
then,
just yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and then what happened both emotionally and financially? What were the first steps that you took?
So I think my thinking was pretty chaotic at the time. Like I was still grieving my mom. I was
Mhm.
still angry at her, very angry at why she had been the cause that the father had not been in my life, and then um, grieving him and not having a father. Well, because I mean, my stepfather had died, and then that like I'd been
No, it makes
grieving over him, and then I thought, oh yay, I have another father, another opportunity, but that never played out. And anyway, so I was all over the place, and then with the money, like I mean, I went from basically living paycheck to paycheck to having $28 million to having within 9 months half of that in my account because I
yeah.
wrote a check to the U.S. Treasury for $12 million and having to write that on just a little bank check and
That's so
writing that
weird.
out. And I mean it was just
Yeah.
surreal.
So let me ask you a question. When he found out about the money, was it like, stashed under his bed? Did like
No, is
someone come
in
up to you at, like, the financial advisor came up to you at his funeral and was like, "Hey, just so you know, like, here's where all the accounts are." Like, how did you find out about all this?
well, again, there was no funeral,
Right.
so um, he had TD Ameritrade statements, and so I contacted TD Ameritrade, and I became the personal representative of the estate, and got access to everything right away. So that's how that happened.
Got it. And how, like, my last guest, she talks about, whose money is this. She was a financial therapist. Her name is Wendy Wright. And so, when you were able to access the funds as the sole heir and beneficiary, whose money was it? Was it your money? What did you feel like it was yours? Did you feel any type of connection to it? Did you feel like, it was my dad's, and he left me as a baby, and or before I was even born? Like, what was that like?
Um, I had no question that it was my money, um, but I didn't really want it. I felt like it was a sick consolation prize. Like what I really wanted was a father. Uh, so I couldn't get that, but here's a bunch of money instead.
Mm.
And I think and then, uh, and it happened so suddenly. And then you have to understand, I guess I didn't talk about this much, but, um, my, my mom, uh, I think had some mental health issues, and, um, as a result, we had a very codependent relationship, and um, so I was I was never really raised knowing how to set boundaries, and so all of a sudden I have a whole bunch of money, and I'm a qualified investor, meaning that like I just have to sign a piece of paper, and then I'm qualified. I'm uh, because of the because of my net worth, I'm instantaneously certified as being smart. So without without
Yeah.
any actual training or preparation or anything.
Right. So for those who don't know out there, once you surpass either $200,000 of income or $1 million net worth, um, you become an accredited investor, which allows you to invest in a little bit more specialized deals and opportunities like private equity and so on and so forth, where the average emerging affluent family does not have access to it.
Right, right. And so and I did. And the other dynamic is because I grew up not really trusting myself, I learned to rely on other people. And there's something called borrowing trust, where I think I did that my whole lifetime. And honestly, I think it's pretty common. Like I think that's why our economy is so uh, consumer oriented. Like people borrow confidence when they buy a certain, buy the latest fashion of clothes or drive this car or something like that. The advertisement shows very confident people. I want to be like that. I'll buy this cologne. I'll buy this shirt. I'll buy whatever it is. And um, and that's needed when you don't have self-respect. So it's taken me a long time to figure out even that this dynamic happens, and then to slightly as I figured out, as I honor myself, I increase self-respect, and I don't have to borrow confidence and respect from other people. But to get back to your point, about the private equity or about investments and risky investments and whatnot, I was doing risky investments because uh, the people who sell those, the people who promote private equity investments or everything or and so on, are very confident, very enthusiastic and energetic, and I love that. And that's ultimately what I wanted. I obviously I didn't want to lose money. I wanted to make money, but they were so confident about it. And so, I mean, absolutely. And I bought onto, I think I bought onto that. I bought onto their promises and whatnot. And to help, it kind of helped give me some meaning, I guess, which was not a good thing, because the best way to find meaning is just like internally, or just by living life,
Yeah.
and by acting and in a good positive way, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. So it's like talk. It sounds like you're going through this wide array of emotion within maybe like a 3 year span, 5 year span. You lost your mom, who basically raised you. She was your only biological parent who was there from the time you were born to the time you were 40. Very codependent relationship. A lot of I mean, you loved her, and then you found out you have a biological father and met him for the first time 6 weeks before he passed away, but we're communicating before that. And then you find out you have $28 million to your name. Obviously, some of that goes to estate taxes, which we'll talk about in a second. But given all these array of emotions, and like, sometimes there are things in life that put us off balance. Like, my dad's passing was one of them for me, and I had to refine my balance. And so you just got, a lot of this money. How did you make decisions? And like, if you were to guide someone else who received some sort of inheritance, would you recommend that? Like, what steps would you have them take to before they started making major investment decisions?
that's a great question. Um, I, I was making decisions way too fast, and I felt like I needed to. Like, um, I had 28 million. Now it's 14 million. I need to build that back up. Like, and so I need to jump into these investments that are going to, give me a big payout and get me back to where I was originally faster. Um, and I mean, in hindsight, if I would have just randomly invested in the stock market, I would have probably averaged about 10% a year, and it would have doubled after about 7, 8 years or something. Um, so, um, but the advice to someone is just take the time, and like, after a loved one dies, you're not even aware of um how disorienting it is. You're not even aware of how you're not yet at a new normal. So it really takes time. Like, yes, I know you're functional. Yes, I know you can still go to work and do all the things that other people can do, but you're not back to an actual new normal and grounded yet. And that takes years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Additionally, yeah, I think you're not psychologically the same as you were before you experienced a very close loss. Additionally, when you receive a lump sum of money in your lap, that also changes the way you view the world, as well as the responsibilities that you have. It sounds like you felt like you had the responsibility based on, the estate tax law, to rebuild that money back up to the 28 million. And additionally, your dad, your biological father, made that money by investing in penny stocks and taking gambles. And so, it sounds like there was an element of not
yeah,
wanting to do him right, wanting to find meaning,
right.
wanting to find purpose, wanting him to, accept you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I wanted to also invest it on my own to kind of honor his legacy, because that did it. However, unfortunately, you can't instantaneously become a good investor. It actually takes a long time. Um,
Especially when you're grieving and when you're,
right,
you're not fully psychologically there.
right. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So you invested in private equity deals like smaller companies?
So, oh my gosh. Um, and I have to tell this story. I invested in a art company in Portland, Oregon, uh, and oh, I want to blurt out the name of the guy, but uh, in any event, um, just so yeah, they have a they have a company where what you do is you invest. No, I'm sorry. What they do is they provide sculptures to schools that are doing or any charity that's doing an or doing an auction, and so they provide the sculpture to the um, charity auction, and there's a minimum bid, and as long as it sells over that amount, then the charity gets 50% and the company gets 50%. I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal, and um, like I mean, it sounds like a real business model. Um, but oh my gosh, I should have dug into why they actually needed the money. It turns out they needed the money because the owner of the company wanted to get a new big house. So after I invested millions of dollars with them, he bought a $2.5 million house in also in Vancouver, Washington. No connection to my biological father, but also up there, coincidentally, complete with the helicopter pad and all this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, and another company that ended up, long story short, ended up segueing into me owning a historic art foundry in southern Italy that has it took it was dying a long death, and it ended up ultimately closing down. I mean, I put millions into it trying to preserve this thing, but um, long story short, it ended up going through a multi-year bankruptcy proceeding that's still not completely wrapped up, but should be wrapped up. Supposed to be within months now, uh, and hopefully I'll be getting a fraction of what I actually invested in it, but I'll be getting a little bit back. But just the pain of that, and I mean, talking about, I mean. I, I, that has just prolonged everything. It kind of feels like, when you see a tree that maybe like someone like it, there's a piece of metal somehow that was like nailed to it, or it grew up like alongside a rock or a piece of metal or something, and then it finally just kind of grows around it and just says, screw it, I'm going to keep going, and it's just going to kind of becomes part of it. I kind of feel like this is like that. Like I have this ugly thing, this investment thing and bankruptcy in Italy and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff, but that it and it's still not resolved. Uh, but I've just kind of through sheer determination, I guess, like grown around it, and I feel like I'm a pretty functional human being now. So I mean, when that finally gets resolved, oh my god, I don't even know what the feeling's gonna. I don't know what that's gonna be like. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Um, so we've talked about separately offline, like two people in two different camps when it comes to inheritance and the impact of inheritance in your personal life. So we talk about, one group is focused on the money and don't really care about legacy, and the other group is focused on, legacy and
Yeah,
doesn't really want the money. Can you explain that a little bit more?
yeah, it's so fascinating. Um, and I will often ask my clients that just so that they can hopefully think more clearly themselves. Um, and it also helps me know what their mindset is. Like, so there are some because it gets a little bit muddy. So let me give you an example. Let's say that um, let's say that your mother died, and um, what happened was some other people took advantage of her, took all the family heirlooms, and you're trying to get that back, and you mainly want to like honor her legacy and get grandma's wedding ring and like get the photographs back and get all of that, and then you start you know, paying thousands of dollars and thousands of dollars for legal fees to try to get that stuff figured out. Um, and then it gets blurred because, like, okay, now you're $10,000 of legal fees into it, $15,000 of legal fees into it. You still don't have anything to show for it. Like, the court doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. We're asking for money, and then then it kind of switches, and then we have to say, well, you have to like pick or choose here. Like, are you making a financial decision? In which case, you probably should just walk away, or is it based on legacy and um, trying to get these things back, because they don't necessarily have nominal value, but they have personal meaning value.
Right.
And so anyway, that it gets blurred, and it's interesting.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. Um, and so talk about legacy and meaning for you when you received the inheritance. Did the money and the investments and the things that you received, did that equal meaning?
No, I mean it. Well, yes, I guess there's always some meaning to it. Um, um, I'm not sure it was healthy. Uh, okay, I'll just throw this out there. So, he had cases of discount wine, uh, and so I brought those home and started drinking through cases of discount wine, and then lo and behold, I eventually actually kind of got into a drinking problem. I had to deal with that. Like, that wasn't good or healthy. Um, and then, uh, well, I mean, just money by itself doesn't. I don't think money by itself. Money is just kind of a form of energy, so it doesn't it doesn't inherently have meaning. It has whatever meaning you give to it. And I remember some. This is embarrassing, but delusional thoughts I had. Like, I used to walk in the neighborhood and think, well, I could just buy 10 of these houses, or 12 of these. I could buy this whole block if I wanted to, and it kind of make. I mean, I felt, I don't know. It's not confident. How did I feel? I guess it made. I guess what, sense of pride or something like that. Like, it was kind of positive, but it also kind of made me feel a little bit empty and lonely at the time. Like, it was weird. It's all jumbled up.
Yeah, kind of like a false sense of pride and a little bit of emptiness.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Um, were there any financial or logistical resources that you wish you had?
Um. Yeah. I mean, just someone like you to talk to. Um. So it's hard to find someone to talk to about this stuff. Like,
Mm,
I mean, most people have no idea what it's like to go from 0 to 14 million. And and like, what, well, a lot of the uh, a lot of the advice was, well, since you have that money, can you help me out? Well, that's not really what I'm looking for.
You're looking for a confidence, someone you can trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And financial, I mean, yeah, and I have a great friend. He's a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley, and he read through my book, and his comment at the end was, "Oh, well, you should have just had a financial planner. Like, you just needed a financial plan." Like, no, that's not. I mean, yeah, but even more important was, like, having a relationship with someone that I trusted, and who I feel understood me, and where I could, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, a plan to have the money safe for a little time, while I, like, got emotionally stable and got my head on straight and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he meant, but
Hmm. Or like a coach, someone to coach you through
there
that
you go.
phase of
There
life.
you go.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And we mentioned like 28, and then you had to write a check for $14 million to the IRS. So Can you just talk to us about how estate taxes work?
Sure. So the politics is all over the place, and so so the federal estate tax, the U.S. estate tax, applies to currently. I don't have the amount memorized, but currently, if you have a net worth of over, let's say, $14 million, you pass away, there's an estate tax on the amount over the 14 million or over that exemption amount. So most people that doesn't even apply to. There was some fear that that it would come down to a $5 million limit, which is kind of where it was years ago. Um, so my so the funny thing, and I think my father was actually aware of this, and I think this is one of the things he was probably trying to whisper to me, but I didn't know what to do. So he died in November, and I'm pretty sure he died in November of um, 2009. Oh, I think I mentioned before, my mom, she didn't die in 2017. She died in 2007. Sorry, the time goes really fast. Anyway, so he died in 2009 when there was a estate tax, and the exemption was pretty low. And then there was no estate tax in the very next year. So I think he was actually trying to like hold on for an extra 2 months, but it didn't work out. So I mean, it's all over the place. So that's mechanically how the estate tax works.
Yeah. So anything over, well, right now it's $15 million a person or $30 million for a married couple. But, in your case, it was, 14. And so anything over that got taxed at, um,
Oh no, no, no,
for
no,
you
no!
guys,
It
it
was
was
it
five, right?
might have been. I can't remember.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was pretty
Okay.
low.
It was a lower amount. And
Mhm.
anything over that gets taxed at what, 40%?
Yeah, yeah. There's stages, but yes, I
Got
think the maximum is like around 42%.
it. Okay. Wow. And so, and then,
And then the state of Washington also has the highest estate tax in the country.
wow.
So
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 not ideal, not an ideal state to pass away in. Um, so as we wrap up the podcast, can you just like how do you talk about money and legacy with your family now and with your with clients now?
yeah. Um, what definitely should not be something heavy. Um, I think just kind of talking about meaning and being open about death and dying, and what you want to see for the future and things like that. I think just being open and being more than superficial.
Paul, let's talk about any like well, let's talk about your practice a little bit. So like you obviously had to go through this probate process personally within your family as well as now you do it for a living. So what happened first? And tell us a little bit about the types of people that you work with in your practice.
Um, yeah. Well, so somehow I got into doing probate litigation, and I think it's honestly, here's what I think. I think I've kind of self-diagnosed myself here. So, you know how military veterans will often come back and they like to ride Harley Davidsons. Well, I think psychologically the reason for that is when you've had trauma from seeing active duty, you've seen death, and that kind of thing. It tends to kind of numb you a little bit, and so like one of the ways to kind of like feel alive again is to do something a little bit dangerous, a little edgy. Be on this loud motorcycle, for example. Um, for me, my equivalent to a Harley is doing probate litigation, and I'm able to connect with people when they're like at their worst place in life. They're emotionally raw. They need some advice, and I can like actually help them. It makes me feel good to connect with them and be able to coach them through a difficult situation, and so that's kind of how I got attracted to it. and of course, I also love to talk to other people, talk to people who are just kind of dealing with the emotional aspects of coming into money, and we see that we see it, like dealing with the same things we've been talking about during this episode of, like, how do you find meaning? Okay, so I have a whole bunch of money, now what? And what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life and everything?
Yeah. And you wrote a book. So what's the title of the book, and what are the
Yeah,
main couple of lessons that um that you can take, that people would
yeah.
take away
I
from
want
it?
to say, yeah. Yeah, I have it over there. It's lasting wealth. Uh, it sounds a little arrogant, but I'll say, a revolutionary method of um, family wealth transfer. And the, the revolutionary idea is maybe not so revolutionary, but it's what I talk about in the book is, I go through my story and I use it as a way of kind of explaining it just as an example, but basically it's to have a code of honor, like to have um, some core principles, or some core understanding among the family members about what they stand for, and like sticking together, for example. I mean, being willing to stick together, being willing to support each other, having clear, open, honest, respectful, direct communication, that kind of a thing. And that's way more important. That's ultimately more important than having a trust.
Yeah. I think the two main mantras and things that I'm going to take away from this episode is, one thing that you mentioned earlier that you just alluded to, is those shared values and those communicated values are far more valuable, pun intended, than the estate plan, the actual trust. You need the logistical documents in order for things to go the right way through the court system. But even as a probate attorney, you harping on the importance of shared values, communication, a strong family dynamic is important. And that code of honor is kind of like that guiding North Star to those family values that and
Yeah.
values that you want to pass on.
Yeah. And so I would love, I mean, to any listener that wants help um, coming up with a code of honor, I would love to help, help walk them through that process, just because it's fun for me.
That's amazing. Well, I and so many listeners will appreciate that as well. I will link your website and email address to the show notes here. But are there any final thoughts, any brief mantras or words of wisdom that you want to leave our audience with?
No, I can't think of anything right now. This has been a great conversation, though, Justin. Thanks for
Amazing.
having me on.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the Currency of Grief. Listeners, thank you so much for also joining us on the Currency of Grief podcast today. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day, so go have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.